Yes, I also learned that about the Highlands area from Phil's book. Um, as many of you may or may not know, Kali's characters are based on her ancestors. So Kali, I wanted to ask if you would talk to us about your ancestors, like Maria Josie, and also touch on the queerness that runs in your family. I'm so happy to see queer characters, being queer myself, and so happy to see this representation in, I mean, I call it the big time bookie world in, in my eyes. But yeah, kind of talk about that if you could. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I brought the butch lesbians to the big time bookie world. Okay, the ones from my family at least. So I come from this huge multicultural family from Denver. My family has been in Denver now for over 100 years on my mother's side, and on my mother's side we've also been in the greater Southwest region since time immemorial, as we're descendants of Pueblo Native people from northern New Mexico. I'm also part Filipino, Jewish, and white European. And my family has always had queer people, and they were always accepted, and it was never something that was weird or bad or anything like that. Like, that was just a part of our family community and our life. And so I write realism. I write about human beings. And so it would be a very strange thing for me to do, to exclude all of these human beings that exist. So from the very beginning, my books have always had queer representation. I'll talk a little bit about Maria Josie. So the matriarch of Woman of Light is a butch woman, and she's based on my Auntie Mary. My Auntie Mary, she got pregnant in the 1920s by an Anglo rancher in their town in southern Colorado, and he would not claim the baby. And the family tried to go to the sheriff. They tried to say, like, this man needs to take responsibility and pay for this. And this is also at a time with deep, deep racial segregation and hatred. And if you do not accept a child, that child is a bastard and that family is ostracized. He would not take responsibility. And my Auntie Mary was then attacked by her own brother with a fire poker. He tried to kill her. It did not work. And she said, to hell with all of you. I'm walking north to the city. She was pregnant. She hitchhiked, she got to the city, she had her son, my Uncle Bobby, and she never dated a man again. And she dressed in men's clothing, she worked at factory jobs, she worked as a garbage truck driver, she worked in a mirror factory like Maria Josie in the novel. And then she sent for all the other siblings, and she paid for them, and she brought them up one by one to the city. So without my Auntie Mary, there would be none of us here. So when I was working on Woman of Light, I was like, I have to honor her. She is a huge influence on our life. And my godfather, one of my cousins, he passed away of HIV, complications of AIDS when I was 2 years old. My godmother is also my cousin. She's an openly queer woman in her 80s. She worked as an electrician at Rocky Flats for 15 years. And there's more and more and more. I can just keep going on. But I wanted, in the media, it's often portrayed as a very difficult thing when a family member comes out or they're ostracized within their families. But in my family, it was weird if you were straight. Like, if you came out and you just said, I only am a heterosexual person and I have no other kinds of leanings, that was really weird in my family. So I wanted to depict realism the way that it was experienced in my multicultural clan. And I love these characters, and I'm glad other people are connecting with them. So thank you, Matt.
Okay, we've got a few more questions, and then I'll let you ask questions. So this is going to be kind of a two-part question. So I did hear that you wanted to be a librarian, and you kind of touched on that. So if you could talk about that just a little more, but I also wanted to add teachers and teaching. Like, we know some of the stories,
Okay.
and she'll probably tell you the stories if you haven't heard the stories. We've had some good and some bad. What does teaching in the teacher community and librarians mean what does their work mean to you, and what does it mean for you to teach as well? Because you're going to go teach in Texas soon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay. Well, first of all, teachers and librarians, I love you so much. I love it! Okay, so first of all, like, you guys teach my book. It's so crazy, my books now. And you take care of your students, and you buy them supplies out of your own money, and you buy them books. You're just amazing, and I love you. Librarians, same thing. I am a big nerd. I didn't have very many friends in school, but guess who I had? The librarians. I remember in high school, my dad would also buy me books, leave them at my door, but also the lunch librarian, the woman who worked during lunchtime. I don't know her name. She was just the cool, really awesome older lady librarian. She noticed I liked Kurt Vonnegut, and one day I came into the library because I had no friends, and that's where I would sit at lunch. She had all the Vonnegut books laid out on the table, and she was like, "I noticed that you like this guy," and then she told me to start with Breakfast of Champions. So you have a really big spot in my heart, especially because I also struggled in school. I'm a non-traditional learner. I probably had a number of learning disabilities that were not diagnosed. I went to elementary school in the early 90s when this wasn't talked about as much. Even reading comprehension was very difficult for me. I could read 2 or 3 pages and the teacher would ask me what I just read, and I wouldn't be able to say a thing. I would just say I read words, but no meaning was sticking. So I had some teachers that really sort of opened my eyes to literature. And one was, we had an exchange teacher named Mr. Andosi from Hungary. He was a queer man, and he taught us House on Mango Street. That was the first time I had ever read that. And this moment was so eye-opening because he said that House on Mango Street reminded him of his own grandma in Hungary, of carrying her when she was sick to the outhouse behind the main house in the lamplight. And I thought, oh my God, he's connecting to this Chicana writer from Chicago's book about his grandma all the way across the world. And that's when I knew it was sort of this moment where I thought, literature is magic. I was like, this is a complete magical thing he's describing. But unfortunately, I also had some very bad teachers, people who looked at me and made assumptions about my intellect based on simply the way I looked or behaved and didn't really ask me what I needed. And I begged and begged to get into the AP English class because I knew that I wanted to be a writer. I've told this story many times, and I hope this teacher never tracks me down and asks why you keep talking about me. But I begged and begged to get in this class because they were reading Flannery O'Connor and James Baldwin, and I was already reading those books. I worked here, and she said, fine, I'll let you into this class, but if you miss any classes or anything like that, you're immediately out. And I said, that's great, whatever. It was my senior year. I was not going to mess up. Immediately, probably 2 weeks into my school year, I had a pretty bad depressive episode, and I missed several days of class. And when I finally got back, I was really nervous and embarrassed to come back. It was a really hard thing to show back up and show my face. And she pulled me aside. She pulled me out into the hallway, which is never good. When they're like, let's go to the hall, you're like, shit. So she pulled me to the hallway, and she was waving around an essay I wrote on Good Country People by Flannery O'Connor. And I could see a big fat A on that paper, but she's waving it around. And she says, you might be a pretty good writer someday, but you've already messed up in this class, and I don't think you're cut out for school. And I was just so overwhelmed. I started crying, and she said, I think you should drop out of high school. You don't have good enough grades to go to college. You can't even get into a community college. I think you need to drop out and go into the trades. And that's really weird because the main character in Sabrina and Karina works in the trades. Just like I should have done, according to this teacher, which I really respect the trades. So, I said, okay, I guess I'm going to go home and drop out. So I walked home that day, and I told my parents that I was never going back to school. And I went and got my GED the next day. And I struggled a little bit. I dropped out of community college after that. But then I got to Metro. And at Metro, I found this huge community of Chicano academics. They really took care of me, and they ushered me into this space where I felt seen and supported. But yeah, I've been so nurtured by many, many teachers and librarians. And one of the reasons I love teaching is because I remember all the times a teacher did not believe I could. And it still happens. It still happens that people, I mean, just the other day I was signing my own book in a bookstore, and a woman said, "I hope you're not just signing some random books." And I said, "No, I wrote these books." You know? So it's still, yeah, these guys. It still happens that people look at me and assume certain things. But that's why I love teaching, because I know that there's a deeper sense of self within everybody, and that's what you really need to focus on. Not the outward packaging, not their past or what they've been through or what you think you know about them. You need to really ask them and learn and grow with them. So I respect you teachers so much, because the work you do is very hard, and it doesn't stop when you go home. I know you all are carrying your students with you at all times. So thank you for doing what you do.